Good morning, friends. Welcome to OBE Journal 2017, the next episode. At some point on your adventure of curiosity, friends, you'll run into the situation of ghosts in buildings. Ghosts who feel that they are an occupation of the buildings, usually homes, but not always. Ghosts who don't even realize that they're there, or that the building has changed in the intervening years since their death. Ghosts who actively fight against renovations of the building that they felt and still feel is theirs. Ghosts who are easygoing, benevolent, and often part of the family, the physical family that's living there now. Over the years, I've had a number of experiences of this nature, and I thought yesterday to reconnect with one particular situation that's quite difficult, at least in terms of if I've got, if I had ambitions about moving these ghosts along, I have met some fairly stiff opposition, and they're still there. And just goes to show you that you can't always get what you want. And the resistance by some earthbounds is quite rooted and intense. They do take root psychically in the buildings or the psychic space that the buildings occupy. And although it's definitely in the interests of their evolution to move along, they don't see it that way. They're quite happy where they are, thank you. They won't leave their thought bubble because they've made it quite comfortable for themselves. So earlier tonight, I exited my body in a pretty much usual fashion, quickly without any fuss, and was on my way to this location. And it's a fairly large house on extensive grounds. And mixture of ghosts there. Almost you might say several generations, some of whom are not related to each other in terms of their earthly lives, lived there at different times, and either don't interact, or when they do interact, it's with disdain and disrespect. They've all rather adopted the tone of the building, as it were, or the psychic space in which the building occupies. Currently, the building seems to be used as a golf club, but some time ago it was a monastery, and some souls of the monks that were there um, are too comfortable to leave or too frightened to leave. Have talked themselves into creating some kind of Christ's kingdom on earth, this sort of thing. And it's a complex situation. First one I meet looks at me and says, "Oh, you again? What do you want this time?" And I say, "I'm just here on a social visit. So come by to say hello." And he doesn't really believe me, but he acts, with a veneer of politeness. And asks me to come along with him and sit in the little garden where the cloister walk goes around, and he will. He doesn't use the word entertain. Talk to me, and I don't tell him that I'm doing this for this reason for the video, so that others will see and gain the experience. And we walk to where the cloister garden is and sit down. And I ask him how things are going here, and he says, "Oh, very well. We have our daily routine. We grow our herbs. We counsel lost souls. And we are dedicated to Christ's work." And I ask if he's considered, any of the issues that we've debated before. And he says, "Well, of course, but why should we leave? We are doing what we were put here to do." And I said, "But you're all dead." And he says, "Well, so what?" I said, "We deal with the dead, the lost dead that come to us." And that is true. They do deal with the lost dead. There are, as I and many others have established or discovered and then established, that the number of earthbound souls floating around as ghosts on our planet is almost innumerable. Oh, not that anyone's taken account, but partly because of our materialist society, or skeptical materialist society. People die and don't believe that there's an afterlife. But then they fairly quickly realize that they still exist, and they have to deal with that paradox. And they do wander around. They start thinking of places that they enjoyed being when alive. And that can be any number of places. Sports facilities, churches, parks, libraries, museums. Some people like riding ferries. Is there any sort of comfort zone spot that they used to use or participate in? And this monastery is something. I'm not saying they would visit this monastery, but when they think of a conventionally spiritual place to be, even if they were, not practicing any kind of religious faith, their desire draws them to places like this, and it exists on a completely different vibrational level, even though it's the same building in the same psychic space or energetic space as a golf club, as a fully functioning golf club. And the two levels of existence continue on without much knowledge of each other. There is the odd ghost sighting by the staff of the golf club, and they have accustomed themselves and think it's dead golfers that really enjoyed being there and wish to, just stay and or visit. And that is true. There are dead golfers floating around the golf club level of the place, and maybe we'll chat with them later. But right now, I want to focus on the monastery and those that are there. And to a large degree, they're living a replica of their physical plane life. And I use these words to the monk that I'm with. I think his name is John. And I say, John, you're just living a replica of your physical plane life. What's the point in that? It's time to move on and learn new things. And he says, there is no need for new things when you've discovered your purpose in God's creation. There is no need to move on. And I tried to tangle with him on this and say, John, you have to understand that your time here is over. A chapter has been finished. It's time to move to the spirit world, the real spirit world, the real afterlife. This is, merely a replica of a physical plane building that has long since ceased to exist. And he says, well, what do you mean cease to exist? Here we are, right here. And I say to him, this is a thought farm, John, a thought farm created by you and the other monks that are collaborating unconsciously in perpetuating your physical plane existence for the benefit of your own comfort zones and fear of moving on. And I don't think he still understands what a thought form is. I've tried to explain it before, and maybe I've been inadequate in my, explanations. But he still doesn't seem to get that. It seems all too real to him. And not that it's any worse in terms of spiritual evolution than any other aspect of what they're doing. But some of these monks are lovers. They sleep together. And they did a little bit when they were alive. I'm not sure how much I've investigated it, but they certainly do now. And far be it from me to criticize people for sexual relations. But it's, or, homo or hetero, doesn't really matter to me. And some of them, of course, interact with underage people, and they're souls of the dead, understand. Teenagers that die, car accidents, whatever, especially drug overdoses. And so they're cared for in a genuine way, but they're also sexually abused. And, you have to weigh the options here, or weigh the pros and cons, if you like. And there is a comfort zone in finding a place of welcoming love, if you like. And I mean, I don't say that cynically. Um, and but it does prevent further growth, or it can. And that's why I come around looking for souls that are feeling frustrated or feeling that this is a dead end street for them, that sort of a thing. And once in a while, I do get people to move on. We're at a time now where people are fairly sexually active, even at a young age. And to enter into an intimate relationship that's not coerced, at least not by most standards, by legal standards. If it was on Earth, it would be seen as abuse because the person would be under 18. But there's no coercion in terms of bending of the will. These are young folks that have already had some sexual experience of one kind or another, and either with their peers or with someone older, in looking for love, as they often are, from broken homes and difficult life situations. And so it's a pattern of behavior that just continues on, and they don't feel particularly oppressed or imprisoned, if those are the correct words. But their spiritual growth is definitely stymied. There's no way they're realizing their greater selves or the extent of the spirit world and its many wonders and joys and opportunities. So it's they live the younger people that are here that aren't dead monks, but dead teenagers, if you like. Living a fairly quiet life, and sometimes doing various work around the place, sometimes joining in prayer and the rituals, the Christian rituals of a monastery, and sometimes just sort of being lazy, as as teenagers are wont to do, in a very typical sort of way. There's smoking thought form marijuana, for example. And like a lot of the lower astral, or I consider such places to be lower astral because the vibration is very low. And not a hell realm, just lower astral. And people create thought forms of things that they want and like, and pot is one of them. And it's all kind of cozy and copacetic, and my attentions are not welcome particularly, but they're tolerated. They're not sort of opposed. And as you can tell from this discussion with John, theological debates are something that are entered into on a fairly regular basis. And but they are happy with what they're doing. They are, to some degree, fulfilled. The level of them that is not fulfilled, and they're in denial of. They're sort of pretending, And as I say, the level of the golf club and the dead golfers hanging around rarely affects them. Perhaps you remember that there's a movie, Nicole Kidman movie called The Others, and it portrayed levels of ghosts in one building, unaware of each other. And I thought that was a brave attempt to do that. It's not always realized at various levels, except by practitioners and facilitators like myself, that this sort of thing can and does go on. Levels of existence within the one area. And as I say, they can continue on quite well without bumping into each other, occupying the same space. It's all about vibration. Just in the same way that the earthbound ghosts and the physical living people are on different levels of vibration. Within the earthbound ghost level, there are different substages. And I'm just trying to head back to this conversation with John. Because I'm not pushing him, I think, as I have done on other occasions, to change or think about change. He, and maybe because he's trying to head me off, he asks about my life and my travels, and what do I do for lost souls? Because they definitely see the young people that find their way to the monastery one way or another as lost souls that need help. Although the kind of help they give them is only partial, and doesn't really lead to anything other than being psychically trapped, not physically trapped, not oppressed, but psychically trapped in a sort of a comfort zone, which a lot of the lower astral is like, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So I tell them, that I move around to various levels of the spirit world and interact with people, sometimes in a sociable manner, like I am with him, sometimes in a more, what's the word, focused, planned intentions of helping people to move out of where they are to a better place, and helping them understand the mysteries of their existence, the mysteries of their post-mortem existence, helping them connect with loved ones in their family, some of whom will still be alive and some of whom will be dead, and convincing them that this is a reality and B, quite possible to do. And he listens, nodding. And I see, he says, I can see you're doing good work, he says. And there's an attempt to sort of compare our existences and our ambitions to help others and our life of helping others. And I agree there are definite similarities, and but I try to add the importance of understanding the various levels and the functions of the various levels, and moving onward and upward to access the full level, or the full sort of palette of options that are available in spirit, and only some of which are available here on his level, doing what they do. And I can tell he's slightly interested, but he's certainly not going to admit it. And as I say, is interested, acts interested is polite, sociable, conversational. There's no, not at least not so far, no attempt to sort of hurry me out of the place and get on with whatever it was he was doing when I got there, and which maybe wasn't very much, because they've been there long enough that they see that they can create things with their minds, a limited number of things because the vibration is fairly low, but the the level of physical work is, how shall I say, less or easier. So they do have a little more time. And certainly when they are meditating or praying, contemplative prayer and singing, chanting, they are visited by higher spirits of their order who try to inject a higher vibration, a greater understanding at those times. But there's a resistance there. And just as let's say in a brotherhood of monasteries that are in various physical locations, and there would be a sort of bureaucratic structure that would manage them and set policy and all that sort of a thing. It's like each individual monastery of that group would resist being directed by superiors, would resist change, would smile and be compliant, but actually not change if change were implied or decided upon and handed down. So it's quite something like that, and the more evolved spirits that join in on this activity don't try to coerce; they just try to bring in a higher vibration of love and understanding to raise the level of the monks there. And certainly the level of hidden sexuality is similar to what we see in the scandals in the church, where certain people are revealed as abusers, and we see documentaries and books where it's understood that there's more than what comes to the courts, and but you also get this sense that the perpetrators ultimately don't really see any wrong in what they're doing. And these monks are the same. They see themselves as caring for others. And it's hard to get them out of that viewpoint and show them the limitations they're putting on themselves. But I mean, lots of folk in the lower astral put limitations on themselves, and astral travelers and explorers like us have to try and open them up to that. And that's our challenge. And as I say, I mean, there's many other kinds of earthbound ghost type situations with maybe just one or two souls involved in a building, often a home, who just want to hang on to the way things were. And I'm sure you've heard and read about this and experienced it in your own travels. I merely seek to illuminate the greater details of this manifestation. So John asked me some questions about my own travels and explorations, and he asks if on the various levels that I visit, are the different religions represented? And I said, oh yes, an area of the heaven worlds for every religious faith, for every religious practice, and including very small sects that are barely known on the world stage. And so everyone creates their own heaven, he says. And I said, well, to some degree, they do. It's hard to find out when a certain heaven level was created because they go back so far in time. And just in the way that some small sects on the physical plane, or cults, if some of them would be called, take over buildings that other sects have vacated on their rise through the economic levels, the fancier church, etc., etc. It's the same in the spirit world. People find buildings and areas unoccupied because previous sects have moved on in one way or another. And so that includes not just buildings and surroundings, but also if it's in a countryside area, fields and woods and whatnot around that. And I do try to emphasize how huge the spirit world is. It's much, much bigger than the physical plane Earth. And of course, most people have trouble even conceptualizing the size of the Earth and the square footage of landscape there. But Earth, the spirit world, is even greater. So perhaps because I'm a little less in his face this time than I've been other times, a little less insistent, he seems a little more interested, less rejecting of my tales of adventure. So we chat on in this sort of fashion. He does ask some more questions, more details about that would intrigue him. How do I relate to people of religious faith with which I'm not familiar? And I said, well, there's always, regardless of practice and outlook, there are always common points, I say. And he asked me what those common points are, and I say, well, the individual's relationship to God, the individual's relationship to the major prophet of that religious faith, whether it be Jesus, Muhammad, or Krishna, or Zoroaster. You can explore those. And certainly the individual's relationship to God is something that every religion has to provide space for. And I say, mainly it's divided up between religions that believe in one life and then eternal life, and other religions, of course, obviously Hinduism and Buddhism, who believe in many lives. And those are the two main divides that I see. And he asks me how I deal with the people, the many millions who believe in reincarnation. And I say, well, it does make things sort of easier because they know from their teachings, whether they're keen practitioners or not, that they will be returning to Earth. They regard that's a given for them. And what I tend to work with is, especially with Hindus, is this trying to get them out of this belief system that says once in a certain caste, one is stuck in a certain caste. And which is, again, just a sort of old-fashioned, encrusted belief system, encrusted with tradition, meaningless tradition. Souls are free to do what they want. and that includes changing castes within the caste system. But they tend to, there's a tendency to want to be reborn amongst souls that they knew from the past life. And that often means a certain economic level and a certain caste. And it can be a challenge, but it's a challenge I'm up to. He doesn't ask, I guess, what I think is the obvious question. Do people that die believing in one life and then eternity ever reincarnate? But maybe he'll, and they do, but maybe he'll ask that question another time. And I feel that his sense of being sociable and friendly and polite is drawing to a close. And, I thank him for his time, and I don't push any farther. And we exchange blessings, and I take my leave. And, walk out and then, disappear as I usually do. And this was, earlier this morning. It's now dawn. This would be about 5 hours ago. And I hope that's been illuminating for you. It's one more, fascinating experience in the large smorgasbord of experiences that you can have when out of body. And I hope that some of you, if not all of you, move through such experiences. Should you feel the need to tangle with the encrusted belief systems of the earthbound spirits. It's a tough haul, but it's not impossible. And don't give up in despair when you don't get immediate results. And I wish you well in all your endeavors, and we'll talk tomorrow.